What are NFL draft analysts saying about Ohio State running back Miyan Williams?
You are Locked On Buckeyes, your daily podcast on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it's spring game week. It's coming up later this weekend, but today it's all about the NFL draft, looking ahead and diving into what NFL scouts are saying about Miyan Williams and Matt Jones. Welcome in, Buckeye fans, to a fun Tuesday edition of Locked On Buckeyes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jay Stevens, also the host of the Jay Stevens Podcast, and I'd like to thank you for making Locked On Buckeyes your first listen every day. Joining us like he does every year before the NFL draft is my favorite NFL draft analyst. It's Ryan Roberts. Follow him on X at Rise, the letter N draft. Ryan and I dive into Ohio State players that will be in the NFL in the upcoming draft. They'll get drafted. We even touch on some that will be undrafted free agents that we even think, hey, pre-draft, they're not going to get drafted. Here's why they might or may not make an NFL team down the road. Today, I do think we got a couple guys. One, I believe, will get drafted. The other, I'm not really sure what Ryan's thoughts are. Miyan Williams is first up. Former Ohio State running back, tied a single-game record in 2022 of 5 rushing touchdowns in a single game. That's an amazing feat. This past year, he got injured. This past year was not like the previous year. And Ryan, when it comes to Miyan Williams and how he's viewed from the NFL side of things, my thought is it's a puzzling picture because he's good, but also there's injuries and not really sure how his play translates to the next level.
I mean, it was a really unfortunate end to the career for Miyan, obviously, because out of 2022, Jay, I felt pretty positive about Miyan. He played really well in the opportunities he got. Yeah, he kind of got banged up a little bit down the stretch of 2022, but you still saw a lot of great things on film, man.
You did.
You saw contact balance. You saw physicality. You saw a good feel for the flow, the second level, the third level flow. I mean, although he's never going to be a guy that's going to be a home run hitter and create a ton of huge plays, you still saw that he could be a valuable member of a running back room potentially.
Correct.
With what he did in 2022. And NFL teams liked him in the preseason. I mean, depending on who you talk to and whether it's Blesto or NFS or just talking, to NFL scouts around the league, there were mid to late day 3 grades on Miyan Williams, draftable grades, because they value that physicality, the ability to block in the passing game, the ability to just kind of be that grinder, a lot of great things. But ultimately the two biggest negatives that Miyan needs to get past that are a little bit troubling. You mentioned one already, durability. I mean, he is going to be at the next level, in probably the best case scenario, he is going to be an active member of a committee approach, right? Whether that is a second or third running back, a guy that brings a power element to the game. Well, if you're a guy that's a secondary player in a room, right? Depth of a room, you can't be injured all the time, right? Like,
No.
You need to be available if you're because the number one ability is availability. That is a very cliche thing to say, but it's also very true, especially for depth players. Those guys need to be dependent upon every single day. Like, make sure they're healthy, make sure that they're a guy that in limited touches can affect the football game. So unfortunately, Miyan has been dealing with that. That has cost him the majority of the 2023 season. He's been banged up throughout the draft process as well. So you hope that he's able to get back to full health, but that's going to be one thing that's going to affect his draft slot. I mean, because right now I would say late rounds, borderline priority free agent type. Like, there's a possibility that Miyan Williams does not get drafted at the end of April. There's a possibility that he gets drafted at the very end of day 3. I mean, that's kind of the window, I think, for him, unfortunately. And the other big thing that I talked about is he's not an explosive runner, right? Like, he's a physical downhill runner, but he doesn't have a second to third gear that is going to create a bunch of explosive plays. He's a guy that needs to be viewed as a grinder. So ultimately, some NFL teams who are kind of value as a secondary option to a running back room explosiveness and home run ability, that's really not going to be the flavor that you're going to get with Miyan Williams. So he's going to have to sell his physical approach to the game, but more than anything, he's going to have to show that he can stay healthy. If he can't stay healthy, then he's going to have a tough time sticking on a roster, for the next several years, because that is going to be a thing that's either going to make or break his evaluation in the long run, is whether if he's available to be available on a week-to-week basis.
It's kind of weird. If we just ended after the 2022 film, I think our conversation, Ryan, is like you said earlier, it's a little completely different than what we're having currently. Even banged up a little bit, but that film in 2022 was so solid. You got to see a guy that didn't have the 100-yard, 100-meter dash speed where he could win that race in high school or college, but he did
Right.
have a type of playing style that was one that offensive linemen loved. It was contagious. It helped the offense in a big way. And even when your number one back and Henderson went down, you weren't losing. Like, it wasn't a major drop off in production. It was actually one where it's kind of surprising what Miyan Williams did in that year. This past year, man, when he decided to go to the NFL, I am thinking, Maya, this is not the move you want to make after this year.
Right.
Stay at Ohio State or transfer somewhere else and do what you need to do to raise your draft stock. But if you're done playing college football, you're completely done. It would be really a waste of time if you was done playing the sport in college and then stayed in college. It could have done really bad things for his mind and his body and a lot of things. If you're not all in on something, it could really backfire on you. But man, that 2022 film was phenomenal. And
Yep.
I don't know how he's going to be playing as a rookie or a second-year guy or even a third-year guy if he gets there, because durability is a question. His playing style is not – he's not going to be a day-one starter. So as much as I like his playing style, I don't know what his future is going to be in the National Football League.
Well, I think that's the cloudiest part of the evaluation is that for some guys, injuries and durability stuff can be freak at times, right? But for Miyan Williams, he is a very physical runner, right? So like
Yeah.
he's not going to be able to avoid contact consistently because he just doesn't have the change of direction, long speed to be able to, work against specific angles and outrun guys to the perimeter and to evade tacklers in space a ton. He is a bruising downhill runner that feasts off of second contact, right? That hidden yardage is the best thing that Miyan Williams brings to the game. And long term, again, that's kind of what worries you. Like, is the durability stuff going to get better when his play style is always going to be about breaking tackles, working through arm tackles? Like it does cloudy the vision on the second level. He reminds me a little bit of James Robinson, who, if you remember James Robinson, who went to the Jaguars first year, looked great, right? He looked great, but then eventually just kind of broke down a little bit, right? Kind of broke down, and now he's obviously no longer the starting running back with the Jaguars after his good start to his career. Miyan Williams is one of those guys, though, Jay, that if he's drafted the right situation and let's say he gets an opportunity, he's able to stay healthy, I think he
Yeah.
can do a good job. I truly
Correct.
do. I think he can be productive in the NFL. The problem is situation is going to dictate a lot, right? Opportunity is going to dictate a lot, and he needs to show that he's available. And then the other part of the durability stuff that worries me that I don't know the answers to. I can look at his durability over the last couple of years and say, like, usually guys that are getting banged up a lot, it doesn't usually fix itself in the NFL, right? Like that's kind of a little
Correct.
bit of a trend. But one thing I have no idea about is after the recent string of injuries, he was already a guy that didn't have a second, third gear.
No.
Did he lose a step? Like, I mean, is he banged up to the point of that his athleticism is deteriorating a little bit? I don't know the answers to that, right? Like, I'm not seeing him on a day-to-day in his training and how the rehab looks and what the long-term prognosis is from the medical side of things. Like, I don't know the answer to that, but that's why durability is a concern. Not only is it the availability I talked about, it's also, is he the same athlete that he was in
Yeah.
2022? I'm not sure what the answer to that is yet.
Ryan, from Miyan Williams, who was a running back last year for the Buckeyes, to a guy who was a starting right guard for the Buckeyes last year, Matthew Jones. I'm curious to hear your thoughts about him as a player. We'll dive into that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and super easy to use. And many of you are like me, looking ahead to next year's college football season. If you're looking to put some money on Ohio State to win the national championship, they currently have the second best odds via our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook to win the Natty in 2024. And that odds right now are at plus 450. Hey, it's a good time to put some money on the Buckeyes. They're looking really good. And the shot to win the national championship looks like they have a legitimate one. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on the YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Ryan, one thing about Ohio State's offensive line that I have grown to realize that it's probably my fault. The offensive line play at Ohio State has gone downhill since I started taking over this show. And I don't get it, bro. I started the show in 2020 post-COVID, and then all of a sudden, good offensive line play. You got a few guys getting drafted last year, and Whippler and Jones and Paris Johnson Jr. Then all of a sudden, I don't know, man. It's not up to the standard, not even that I would want at Ohio State. As the school has set at this as a standard. Matthew Jones comes to mind. He's the only offensive lineman, I believe, only offensive lineman that's going to get as eligible that entered the NFL draft. And so, one, I love offensive line play. I have a hard time describing and knowing what's going to translate from college to the National Football League. So when you watch the film on him, what do you think will immediately translate to the next level?
I mean, we talk about this all the time, Jay, and I know we've talked about it on this show before, but like there's a couple key positions that I feel like people talk about. Where does experience matter the most, right? Like
Yeah.
at what positions do the number of starts and the number of snaps and the games played, like where does it matter? And I think that the two positions that matter most is quarterback and offensive line. Like those
Mm-hmm.
ones really do matter most. I mean, we know the historical data, especially over the last like 10, 15 years of quarterbacks that were 1-year starters in college and that flame out in the NFL because it's just a position that you need to play a lot of. Like you need the live reps. I think offensive line is the same thing, right? Where offensive line, you look at it and you say technique matters so much. Like, of course, there's
Yeah.
a level of size and foot quickness and length and all those things that you bring to the table that matter, but ultimately experience matters a ton. And I think that one thing that Matthew Jones brings is played a lot of football. He's played a whole
He
lot
did.
of football, which I think will be beneficial on the next level to him early on because he's a guy that has played in a zone blocking scheme. He's played in a gap scheme. Like I think he'll be able to pick it up just off the forefront, being able to have so much experience in multiple types of blocking schemes. And that I think will help him potentially translate to finding a roster spot in 2024.
I sure hope so. Where do you think he'll get drafted?
I'm not sure he does get drafted. Because
Okay.
I like that was the positive, right? Of like what could help him stick. But Jay, honestly, like I think
Yeah.
that Matthew Jones, and this is gonna be a very mean statement, so I hope that people don't take this as like too mean. But I think Matthew Jones is it's very symbolic of what you just said as far as the offensive line play kind of getting worse and worse the longer that you've been covering the team. Is that I think when you talk about the 2023 team, it's encapsulated in the fact of there's not a lot of talent on the offensive line right now. Like 2022, there was a lot of talents. I mean, Paris Johnson Jr. is a freak show. DeJuan Jones, although lazy, is a very talented football player. Luke Whippler, very talented football player. I mean, like you had talent up front. 2023, I just don't think there was a lot of talents. I mean, you had to go to the transfer portal obviously to get like a Josh Simmons. Josh Fryer's playing out of position, playing right tackle when he's probably really a guard. Donovan Jackson's just kind of been the same guy or worse over the last couple of years after kind of starting out really well as a redshirt freshman a couple of years ago. So, I mean, ultimately, I think that Matthew Jones just lacks talents because I mean, if you look at his combine testing numbers, I think it's a perfect example of that, right? Like he is just a big, bruising, mauling type that lacks change of direction. He's not incredibly explosive. He's a dependable guy, right? Like he's usually in the right spot. He's usually the right assignment. All those things matter, obviously. But I think he's a borderline draftable football player. I think he's probably more of a priority free agent just because I think he lacks the overall athleticism and upside to be a guy that's a valuable at least a valuable depth piece on an offensive line. I think he's a very borderline rosterable player in 2024.
You know, when I think about him and you describe it that way, I think back to when I played in high school football and didn't really understand this until a few years after. And as I get older and evaluating football, I think about the guys that I played football with that were really good football players. I mean, they were solid. They were really, really good. But then I wondered, why didn't they make it at the next level? Them being solid and being a good football player doesn't always translate because that's a harder brand of football. It's a lot tougher to go from high school to play college. And if I'm going to college to the NFL, that's even a larger jump than people may think it is. And Matthew Jones is just one of those guys, good. He's a starter. That's great.
Yep.
He's solid.
Mhm.
But at the next level, as you said so well, he just doesn't have those traits or the skill set to make it there. I'll ask you this question, though.
Okay.
Assuming, let's just say he does get a priority free agent. I know this is a prediction for a few months from now. Do
Yeah.
you think he can make a 53-man roster?
It's possible, yeah, because here's the one thing about the NFL that is no secret. There's not enough good offensive linemen in the NFL.
Correct.
Like, there just
Correct.
isn't, man. Like, it is. There's some guys that are rosterable on a year-to-year basis that I'm like, I had a UDFA grade on that guy. Like, I don't think he's overly
Yeah.
good, but ultimately they stick because there's a deficiency at offensive line across the NFL. I mean, there's barely any. I don't know if there's a team right now in the NFL that I would say have 5 good starters on the offensive line, and then therefore that trickle down effect happens where you have some guys that are reserves and depth pieces that just maybe aren't sufficient enough to be long term answers there. Obviously, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that he has a chance because again, he's experienced. He's played a lot of football. He's a bigger framed guy. He's very strong and he's physical. So those things can be rosterable. I think the situation is definitely going to matter. If he's a priority for agents, for instance, I hope and I pray, and this is something that I don't know the answer to. Whoever his agent is, I hope that they're doing their homework as far as what these depth charts look like, what is going to be the best system for him to fall into, and what offensive line coach speaks highly of Matthew Jones. Because all those things together are going to signify a good fit for me on the next level. And it's his agent's job to find that potential good fit.
You know how hard it is for guys that are in his position to find a good agent? Because there's agents right now that may want to represent him. And this isn't a knock
Yeah.
on him. It's just saying,
No.
like, you're coming out of college. You're trying to go into the NFL. These agents want you, but they also want to make a lot of money. So I feel bad for people in his situation because getting a wrong agent could mean you don't make an NFL team.
Well, I would say this without naming names, obviously, right? But like I am
Mhm.
in the consulting side of the NFL draft space as well, which means I work with a whole lot of agents for player evaluations. And luckily, I work with some great ones. So this isn't as much of like a who I work with directly type of thing, but I've been around this business for a while now, and there are a lot of bad agents out there. Like there just are. There just are. There's guys that one, they don't do their due diligence with research, but then two, when they're trying to sign these players, like I guarantee this happened to Matthew Jones, guarantee it, because he was a multi-year starter at offensive guard at Ohio State, right? Some agents will look at that alone, not look at the film, will look at that alone and will offer a ridiculous amount of money for them to sign with their agency and will and in order for them to sign, Jay, what happens? A lot of lying happens, right? Oh, Matthew, we're hearing 4th to 5th round grades on you, even if that's not the reality of the conversation. It happens all the time, man. I have heard some outrageous stories as far as agents just taking advantage of players, wanting to get them to sign with them. So they lie. They lie to them, right? Like, here's what I'll compensate you with, but also this is what we're hearing. And if you have a great pro day, this is how much you can rise. And this is when in reality, they just didn't have a good understanding of what it was for one,
Mhm.
or they're lying to them just to have
Yeah.
just to represent them, right? So unfortunately, that is the shady part of the business. I just hope again, like I hope with every player, that you have a person representing you that cares, right? That truly cares about what's best for you. Because I do think if he lands into the right situation, Matthew Jones could stick on a roster. Again, there's not enough good offensive linemen in the NFL right now. There's not. Could a guy that's played that much football, that is as physical as he is, could he find a home on the next level? It's very possible, but it's going to be about finding the right fit if you are a priority free agent and you get that opportunity.
I know it's early in this process, Ryan, so I'm not trying to. If you haven't done this, I understand. Have you watched any
Mhm.
film on Carson Hinsman?
Not as I mean, so like in passing, right? And
Okay.
actually, I will say this, just kind of a little nugget. I talked to a scouts a couple of weeks ago, actually about just Ohio State players, just in general
Yeah.
coming out. But
Yeah.
we also talked a little bit about next year's offensive line group because like it's a very strange group. I mean, we mentioned like Josh
Yeah.
Simmons, the San Diego State transfer at left tackle. Mentioned Josh Fryer, excuse me, Josh Fryer at right tackle. That's more of a guard. We mentioned Donovan Jackson. A scout that I talked to actually, that was the one guy they mentioned in a very positive light was Carson Hinsman, right? Like they were like, I think that young center it might not be a couple years before he comes out, but he might be the best one of that group potentially long term. So there's some positive feedback there, but I would be lying if I said that I've done like a deep dive in Carson Hisman
Yeah.
so far. Like it's just very just early peaks as far as watching some of the running backs for next year.
That's a good segue. I'm going to not even go deeper into the offensive line conversation because Ryan and I are going to talk about Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson and where they might land as NFL prospects for the 2025 NFL Draft. This episode is brought to you by Billiards Plus. Billiards Plus has the best selection of pool tables, game tables, shuffleboard tables, and more. And the best service in Central Ohio. Billiards Plus also carries grills that have up to 30-year warranties. That's right, a grill with a 30-year warranty. Everything you need for in-home and backyard entertainment is at Billiards Plus. Billiards Plus carries the best pool tables from Brunswick, Alhassan, Canada, Billiards, and more. They are family-owned and operated, and when you talk to the staff at Billiards Plus, you know you're talking to an expert who won't steer you wrong. No matter the season, Billiards Plus has you covered for all your indoor and outdoor entertainment needs. Kenny, Sarah, and the whole staff will always go above and beyond to give you the best customer service in the industry. Billiards Plus, visit their showroom on Dublin Center Drive in Dublin. Ryan, it's like you read my mind. I don't know if you've been tapped into my mind lately, but you know what's coming up next on the show. Henderson, we did this the last time we were on here, but not like in a longer form segment of the show talking about Henderson and Judkins. Let's go to the newcomer first. I think Quinshon Judkins, I'm going to make a big statement here. Haven't made this at all. I think Quinshon Judkins has the chance to be the best running back in the Big Ten, win the award for the best running back in the Big Ten, and could be a second-round pick next year. I don't know what your thoughts are, but those are mine.
Wow, Jay. So that is a big statement to make. I might need to do like a college football hot take conversation on Twitter, and you might need to post that, man, because that's spicy. I like it. I love that type of stuff, man. So my early conversation about Quinshon, I really like the freshman film that he put out in 2022. 2023 was a little bit more of a mixed bag. I think there was a couple reasons for that. One, I think the Ole Miss offensive line was pretty bad in 2023. I don't think it was all a Quinshon issue. I think Quinshon, for me, if I had to pick a round for him right now, I'd probably say the 4th round, give or take a round right now, right? Where I think that he brings a lot of stableness to the running back position because he's a bigger back, he's very physical, he's downhill, and he's decisive. Those things are all great. I do have some questions as far as, and when we talk about Travion, it's a completely different conversation. Like, I do have some questions as far as like the overall movement skills for Quinshon. Like, I think he's a good one-cut runner. I don't know if I necessarily see a long speed to him, and I don't know if he's the most quick in short areas. I think, though, that he does have good vision, and I think that he moves laterally pretty well. But I do think that he is a downhill physical runner. Like, he's how we talked about Miyan Williams, right, earlier in the show. He is the A-plus version of Miyan Williams from the downhill physical aspect, but he's got more juice and he's got a little bit more just wiggle to him as a runner overall. So I like Quinshon as a potential day 2 pick. I think that he can get into that conversation with a big year at Ohio State. I just hope that, because Ohio State's, although their offensive line wasn't great in 2023, he's going to get a lot more running lanes in 2024 than he had with Ole Miss in 2023, because just the blocking scheme in general under Ryan Day, there are some easy running lanes to evaluate. And I want to see just how much juice this young man has, because unfortunately in 2023 at Ole Miss, he just didn't have an opportunity to run through clear vision a lot, because it was just a little bit murky inside for them.
You know, my thing with him, and I understand Henderson's here. People may hear me make that big statement about Judkins and not do it about Henderson. I just think Judkins is going to take a step in the right direction in a positive way in his play in 2024. And I think that Chip Kelly will be a great, and also Carlos Laughlin, new running backs coach. I don't know much about the guy, but I just know his production when he's there in Oregon was really, really good. So I do think Judkins can tap into Laughlin's expertise and Chip Kelly's expertise as well. And Judkins can take a step in the right direction. I do think my prediction of second-round pick and all the things for the Big Ten, I just think the offensive line play, okay, I'm hoping. If they have Fryer, I'm not a fan of Fryer at right tackle. I even told this to my wife recently, and I was like, Fryer at right tackle doesn't make any sense. Like, he's out there by himself sometimes on an island, and he just doesn't do well. Like, some guys just can't do it. Put him where he's comfortable, put him at right guard, but I don't know if they'll make that move. So a lot of this is me believing and hoping Ohio State will make the right moves with the offensive line, which is why I mentioned Hinchman earlier. If they don't, it doesn't matter who the running backs are. It could be a hot mess again.
Yeah, I mean, it could be because I think, again, we talked about this when Paris Johnson and DeJuan Jones are coming out.
Correct.
I actually really like Justin Fry as a coach. I think that Justin Fry is a very good offensive line coach. I really do. I think that right now Ohio State's dealing with the very simple fact that they have not recruited the offensive line position well enough over the last couple of years, and there's a lack of talent right now.
Yes.
There was a reason that they were trying to be active in the portal. Everybody knew about it. Like Derek Graham, the Troy transfer that ended up at Texas A&M, like they were in on him, right? Like they were trying to get a guy like that, for instance. I think they know that they have a lack of talent because Jay, our conversation about Josh Fryer in this offensive line would be a whole lot different if he was playing his natural position inside a guard. Because I think he has some upside at that spot. Unfortunately, and it's not his fault, obviously. He's being a team player and he's doing what the team's asking him to do. But I just think that there's a lack of talent up front. But regardless, I do think that in some ways you mitigate the fact that the offensive line might not be the most talented is that I do think that Ohio State has a tremendous running scheme. My biggest question with Ryan Day has always been is that he seems to go away from the run a little bit too much and goes a little bit pass happy a lot of the times. But I think that his run game scheme is very good. I think that he gets guys in space a ton. I think he understands, how to kind of sequence runs off of each other to be a kind of a complementary type of play caller as well. I just think that he gets a little bit pass happy reliant, a little bit too much. So I think there'll be a lot more lanes, especially for Quinshon Judkins compared to what he was used to see at Ole Miss, especially in 2023.
Well, my hope is that some of those lanes you talk about for Judkins, they'll be open for Henderson. Because if Henderson's vision continues to get better in a big way, watch out. Now, I'm still not I'm higher on Henderson than I have been, Ryan. I'm trying to be a nice guy right now. But I do believe his durability. Like, he can't get if he gets hurt again in this upcoming season, it doesn't look good for him from an NFL standpoint for next year's draft. We know he can be good. We know there's limitations to his game. But just like with Miyan Williams, maybe not in as big of a way as Miyan, but maybe it is. Durability is a question for Henderson too. And if he's healthy, he could be a really good back this year.
Well, I will say this, Jay. Here's I don't know if this is a hot take. I don't think it's a hot take because we've known about TreVeyon Henderson now for 4 years. It's been a long time now. If TreVeyon could stay healthy, and I know that's an if because we talked about the durability stuff, right? Next year's 2025 running back class early on looks really, really good. Really good. You have the Jay Knott kid out of Cal, who I think is a tremendous football player. Boise State, Ashton Gianti, I think is a tremendous football player. TreVeyon Henderson obviously has a ton of talents. Edwards over at Michigan. There's a ton of guys in next year's class that could be that dude. I think that if TreVeyon stays healthy, he could be running back one next year. He has the talent to be that. He has the talent, I think, to be a top 50 pick in the 2025 NFL draft, which I think is a reason that he came back for another year because he's just so talented. He's so gifted.
Yeah.
I mean, he's going to be a guy that, whether it's at the combine or the pro day, he's going to put up some stupid testing numbers. He's going to, man. He can go when he gets an opening and he's able to crease it. Again, I always come back to that Notre Dame Ohio State game. Notre Dame had a really good defense this year, but it only took one bad angle by a Notre Dame safety for TreVeyon to completely outrun and eliminate an angle and go for 6. It's just that easy for him at times. He has all the talent to be that guy. It's just about now, and good signs was I've seen pictures of him in some videos so far. He looks like he's put on a good amount of body armor this offseason, man. He looks very well put together. If he's able to carry that and maintain the athleticism and stay healthy, he has a chance to be running back one in 2025. He certainly has that talent to him.
Oh, absolutely. I believe that when it comes to him, the vision that I was very critical of early in his career has gotten better. So that's he's checking a box saying, yes, I am improving that. Physicality and physically. I remember last year at the spring game, I looked at my wife and I said, hey, that kid is small. Now, those weren't my words, but it was something along those lines. He looks smaller than I remembered him being prior to being there for that spring game. So he looks physically better and ready and prepared to play. His vision has gotten better. And I do think the running style of Judkins complements him very, very well to where Chip Kelly can dial some things up. And I really hope at some point we see a scenario where Henderson and Judkins are on the field at the same time You put
Oh,
them
yeah.
two in the backfield. Like, even if you do, like, I don't know if Chip Kelly's really going to do this. I haven't watched UCLA's offense a lot, but if you put a quarterback under center and then do the old school, like, split back set, dude, people's like, what's going to happen? What are we doing? This is Chip Kelly taking advantage of a lot of good running backs, and I am here for the old school style of play in 2024.
Well, so everyone that hears offensive guru associated with Chip Kelly's name, I feel like our offensive gurus, sometimes our minds go to like the passing game. But my favorite thing about Chip Kelly is he is a run game savant, man. Like, he
Yes.
really is super creative with his outside zone stuff, with his misdirection stuff. Like, he is for all the faults that Chip Kelly has as a head coach, because I live right outside of Philadelphia, so I saw him with the Eagles, and he went from a very promising early tenure with the Eagles to just derailing that program in a couple years, right? I just don't think he's a head coach, but as an offensive coordinator, as a play caller, the dude's a stud. I mean, there's no doubt
Yes.
about it. I mean, Ohio State has, as long as there's no ego guilt, hierarchy happening here between him and
Mhm.
Day, they have one of the best offensive play callers in all of college football. They haven't, I mean, Chip
Correct.
Kelly has an argument to being the best. So overall, I think that he can unlock the best of that backfield, because you mentioned it. We're having the same conversation at Notre Dame right now. Like, we want some 21 personnel, man. We want some two backs in the backfield. And because the great thing is that when you have two running backs with completely different skill sets, which is what you have with Judkins and Henderson, they should be able to play off of each other well. I mean, I can
Correct.
imagine just a two back set where it's like I'm riding inside zone with Judkins. Oh, the outside, the outside contained player crashes down, and here I just throw a little swing screen out to Henderson and let him work it in space a little bit, right? Like, those things should be on the table because they have varying skill sets, and you have a great offensive mind in Chip Kelly running the show.
Last thing here, Ryan. I know we said no Will Howard earlier, but I got to
Oh
do
no.
it.
Okay.
Do you think Will Howard is the kind of quarterback that will excel in Chip Kelly's offense?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I think you're going to ask me NFL draft wise my thoughts on Will Howard. This might
No,
be a
no,
totally
no, no,
different
no, no,
conversation.
no. I'm saving that for later on purpose. Trust
Yeah.
me.
Okay.
We'll hit that. We'll hit that in the summer. No, I'm going to go for Buckeyes fans getting football fix for this upcoming year.
I think that Will Howard has enough talent as both a in-structure thrower and athletes, because he is a pretty good athlete. I feel like people don't give him enough
He
credit, but
is.
like, he ran pretty well at Kansas State. I think if we're talking about Chip Kelly's experience with running quarterbacks, I mean, obviously he's a different type than what like Dorian Thompson Robinson was,
Yeah,
what he had
yeah.
obviously with Marcus Mariota in the early days of Oregon, but he does have a profile where the zone read game should be something that he's using a little bit. Will Howard's also a huge quarterback. So maybe some power read stuff where you're trying to get him downhill at times as well. So I think the running component meshes very well with Chip Kelly. And I think the great thing about Chip is that Chip makes things easy for quarterbacks, right? Because
He does.
again, the misnomer, Chip Kelly is a running offensive coordinator. He wants to establish the run, and he wants to get downhill, and he wants to give you a lot of looks in the run game, and the passing game is an extension off of that run game. So yeah, I think Will Howard has more than enough talent and a more than enough dual threat capability to be very productive in the Chip Kelly offense. There's no doubt. There have been less talented quarterbacks that have been productive with Chip Kelly. Like, we'll leave it at that. There have been much less talented quarterbacks that have been very good with him.
Is that a shot at Joey Harrington? I think
Yeah,
that was his name, the kid.
you could, Joey. I don't think he was with Joey, but maybe somebody that he
Oh
coached.
no,
At,
no, no. Sorry, he wasn't there for
yeah.
that. He wasn't there for that.
He was there at New Hampshire with Ricky Santos, and then he was with Marcus Mariota. Who was the quarterback after Mariota, though? There was somebody there, I think, for a little bit. And then UCLA. I mean, I just wasn't a big Dorian Thompson Robinson fan. I guess you could say that Dorian Thompson Robinson was more talented than at least athletically than Will Howard, but I don't know if he was a better all around quarterback. So but either way, I think Chip could get a lot of the quarterback position potentially.
If you guys
I
loved
bet,
Ryan, what he had to
I bet you didn't
yeah,
think you were going to get a Ricky Santos mention on this podcast
no,
today, former New Hampshire great. I didn't think you got that one.
no, not at all. That was not on my bingo card, Ryan. If you guys love what Ryan had to say today about Ohio State players, or maybe you didn't like what he had to say, leave your comments in the YouTube comment section on the YouTube or even on Apple or Spotify. Leave us a 5-star rating and a comment there as well. We'd love your feedback about today's show. You can follow Ryan on X at Rise. I love the letter in draft. You can follow me on the same platform at jstevens07. Send all emails to jstevens317 at gmail.com.